Joining me now, former Liberal MP Nicolle Flint. She knows marginal seats inside out. And Pauline Hanson's Chief of Staff, James Ashby. Well, welcome to you both. James, I'll start with you. You are also no slouch when it comes to campaigns. Dunkley. It's fascinating to me hearing Tom come off the top there saying, you know, the things that are going in the Liberal Party's favour in this seat, lots of tradies, lots of people with a mortgage. I mean, 20 or 30 years ago, that was Labor bread and butter, and this shows you how divorced they are from working Australians.
Yeah, you bet. And if this goes against the Labor Party, as I think it will this week, certainly we've only got 2 days to go. The campaigning is hot on the ground, as we've seen on news bulletins. But Anthony Albanese, by rights, will probably go to an early election. And I would suggest it's 2024 he'll do that, not wait until 2025, because there are plenty of other marginal seats in other very similar areas across this country, not just Victoria. These are middle-class people that have had a gutful of a Prime Minister who doesn't understand what middle class are going through. The Prime Minister has been absent from this country for far too long. He has lied to the people over tax cuts. And now we're only hearing today another charge on one of those 149 detainees that have been released for sexual assault has occurred. So all these things are going against the Labor Party. And, of course, the announcement this morning that someone within, I suspect it's Labor, has been a spy caught out by ASIO, these are not going to play to the Prime Minister's favour.
I'll just mention too, those charges now, James, have been withdrawn by Victoria Police late this afternoon, but couldn't agree more with everything else you had to say. Nick, that's all right. No, Nick, you represented a marginal seat that's not dissimilar to the seat of Dunkley. I know you keep your hand in South Australian politics. Give me your sense of how the issues, I mean, the ute tax coming for tradies and others is a perfect example, the emission standard. Give me a sense how you think the issues will be playing out in a seat like Dunkley.
Well, I really have to agree with all of James's assessments, Peter. The tradie tax, the ute tax, which will hit grey nomads, families, farmers as well. It's cost of living. Like, cost of living is through the roof for anyone who's renting or has a mortgage, and that will be very decisive in Dunkley and other seats like Boothby, you know, Western New South Wales, Western Sydney. All of our mortgage belt seats are really feeling it at the moment. They know they've been lied to by the Prime Minister on power prices. Power prices are hurting our small businesses as well, Peter. It's food, it's fuel, it's not even being able to buy a beer at the pub anymore because prices are going through the roof. So Dunkley is going to be a very important indicator of what is to come for both the Coalition and the Labor Party at the next federal election. I can't see Labor getting on top of any of these issues because they've had plenty of time and they haven't done it.
James, the PM's going out there sort of saying, a 7% swing sort of the average. Well, no sophologist out there, Anthony Green or our wonderful Tom Connell, is saying it's anywhere near an average at 7%. I think the best average you can find there for the Prime Minister taking out Aston, call that an outlier, taking out the citizenships is 2.7. I mean, I reckon 2.7 is sort of on the cards come the weekend. But what about the preferencing by Labor of the Greens? Because all week in the Parliament, the PM's talked tough about the Greens. But this is what they do all the time, right? He wouldn't be in power if it wasn't for the Greens. They preference them at every election.
Well, they heavily relied on them in the last 2 terms of government or the last 2 elections to certainly get them across the line. And sure, they've got a slightly bigger margin this time than the previous election. But that's an election where One Nation and UAP were running. We've deliberately stayed out. UAP is no longer registered across the country federally, so they're not running. We've deliberately, as One Nation, stayed out of this by-election because if there is to be a litmus test as to who is better respected by the public here, there's 8% between One Nation and UAP that should, by rights, go to the Coalition. And Peter Dutton is like an old Massey Ferguson tractor. He's reliable, he's trustworthy. That's why farmers keep him on the paddock. And I think that the Australian people would trust Peter Dutton over this current Prime Minister.
I made that point earlier in the week that it's a very different field of candidates than 2022. I will be looking for that vote out there on the centre right too, James, come Saturday night. Hey, Nicolle, the head of the Bureau of Meteorology, I mean, this is just audacious. He was out today blaming the media for catastrophising, he says, all this hot weather, for the media making a big song and dance about the El Nino or El Nina, whatever, which way it was, the summer that never really eventuated. But of course, you and I both know we've got family that are farmers. The bomb was out there in spring last year saying it's going to be a horror summer, dry summer, no feed, issues with water and rainfall, get rid of your stock. A lot of farmers did, and of course that weather didn't turn up.
Exactly, Peter, and I think I read something with the head of BOM trying to allege that farmers wouldn't make business decisions based on BOM's advice. Well, that is completely outrageous. If that is what he said to Parliament last night, that is completely outrageous, because of course farmers make business decisions based on the advice of BOM. Who on earth else are they going to get their weather advice from? And it has cost Australian farmers millions, probably hundreds of millions of dollars, because they did destock, which flooded the market. It affected sheep and cattle. And that has a flow-on effect into every single community, let alone the federal budget bottom dollar that has, because we've seen stock prices crash, essentially. Now, they've come back, but last year was disastrous for livestock producers, and we have a wine glut, which is hugely concerning for our poor wine growers around the nation. Labor has got things into a terrible mess, and it's thanks to the likes of BOM. So they need to be held to account, and I don't see Labor doing that.
James, what's going on in Queensland, the fallout, I mean, regarding that decision in the Supreme Court that said COVID-19 vaccine mandates for frontline workers are illegal? This says to me compensation is going to be on the table, and all of those return to work orders or the stay away orders will be now reversed. I know in the case of Victoria, I was speaking to firefighters this week. I mean, they still can't work in Victoria unless they have 3 jabs. 55 of them around the country are stood down. Do we think we'll see compensation paid out of Queensland?
Yeah, and look, a lot of these people deserve it rightly. Some have lost homes. I know in my area of Keppel, we're running for the state. I've spoken to families there where one's a prison guard officer and the other's a school teacher, and both were threatened with their jobs. Both have certainly had professional misconduct threats against them in the police force as well. Look, it's one thing to say the state should be on the hook here, but I think a lot of these people, they're frontline service people who are supposed to be represented by unions. Part of me says the unions should be on the hook for compensation as well, because typically unions go out there and fight tooth and nail to the letter of the law, and in this case they have overlooked the unlawful nature of these mandates that were implemented not just by the state government but then also supported by the union. So the police union, you should hang your head in shame, Ian. I generally like you, but you got this wrong. The teachers' union, you got it wrong. The nurses' union, you got it wrong. And so too did so many other frontline workers who were relying, ambulance officers, those in the prison system. You pay good dues every single year. I think your unions at least owe you what you paid them the last couple of years as a medium form of compensation. And yes, the state should be on the hook.
Nick, a quick one. I read a report today, 40 politicians federally, they own investment properties, but they haven't listed the rent they're getting from them, if they're getting rent, on the register. Now, I know they don't have to put the quantum of the rent, but if it's being rented out, I thought they had to, under the rules, say they're receiving rental income.
Well, Peter, if they're not following the rules, the department needs to hold them to account. We've got a lot of well-paid bureaucrats that are responsible for monitoring these sorts of things, and they need to enforce the rules. I mean, remember Section 44, we all got audited. It sounds like the department needs to do an audit and work out what's going on here.
Yeah, I want them to play by the rules, absolutely. Thank you both, James. Ashby, Nicolle Flint, great to have your company. Great to have your company too. It's been a wonderful week.